In this lesson, we'll learn how to create a reusable button class. A class is a functional code block that makes it easy to create multiple copies or instances that take their properties and methods from a single source, the class. In Corona and Lua, we're really creating a function that makes a prototype for future objects. But we won't mince words here in terms of the fine details between class and prototype. To keep it simple, we'll think of classes as bits of code that let us turn out usable and functional objects quickly. Let's create a new table and call it button. This will be the table for our button class. Notice the capital B. Anytime we code a class, we'll always capitalize the first letter of the class name. Now we'll create a method called new that will create an instance of the button class. The argument params will be a table that we feed into the new method of the button object. Within this function, we'll type the following. We'll create a new local variable. This variable will be local to the new method of the button class. We'll set this equal to a new display group. The variable that we just created represents a group that will house all of the display objects for the class. Because we'll need to return this group, we'll type return btn. A button contains two visual states. The first is the state when the button isn't pressed. The second is the state when the button is pressed. Within the Images folder in my project directory, I've got two images that I'll use for the on and off states of the button. We'll create local variables for the on and off state. We'll create a new image and assign it to the off variable. For the path argument, we'll create a variable called offIMG that points to the location of the off image. We'll want to implement some flexibility in case we want to switch the on and off state buttons as we create them, so we'll type a ternary operator. Here, what we're saying is that if params is true, that is, we've supplied arguments, and the .off property of the params object is set, then we'll use that as the argument. Otherwise, we'll use images/foo.png as the argument for off image. Now, we'll assign this within new image rect. This image happens to be 100 by 100. We'll copy these two lines and paste them, as the on image will be essentially the same thing. Now we'll make a few subtle changes. The on object represents the image that's to be shown when the button's pressed. Right now, it's over top of the off state, so we'll set the alpha of the on object to 0 so that we hide it. Now, we'll insert these two images into the group. Next, we'll need to provide a way to position the button object. Here, we'll write the following. Just as we did with the on and off images, here we're saying that the button.x will be equal to params.x if it is set, and that's indicated by params, or if it's not set, 0. The same thing for button.y. The heart of the button object will be an event listener, so let's create one. Before proceeding, the return button statement needs to go at the very end of the class, so I just noticed it's not there. Now we'll code the touch event listener for the button object. First, we'll implement the detection of our phases. Remember that HasFocus is a custom property of the button object that will code in the Began phase. Within the Began phase, we'll need to set the focus of the stage to the button. Then we'll need to set the HasFocus property. Because the Began phase fires when the user touches the button, we'll need to show the on state. Now, within the else if self.hasFocus branch, we'll type the following. We'll account for the ended phase of the touch. Since this is a button, there will be no use for the moved phase. We'll hide the on state by setting its alpha to 0. Then we'll release the focus and set the HasFocus property of the button object to false. Finally, within this touch handler, we'll return true to denote that the touch has been handled. Notice that this goes outside of the conditional statements that deal with the touches. If we were to test our code now, we wouldn't see anything. That's because we need to create an instance of the button class. Outside of our code for the button class, we'll type the following. We'll call the new method of the button class. Here, we're creating a button and we're assigning it to the variable fooBarButton. Now we'll position the button. Let's take a look at the result in the simulator. When we tap the button, the on state appears. When we release, the off state appears. Remember that what's really happening is we're simply hiding the on state. This ends our lesson on how to create a reusable button class.